Welcome to the Climate and Coordination RCast, where every week we'll be discussing topics related to all things climate change and RChain's role in the solution. We will be discussing technologies that can adapt and coordinate massive amounts of data like never before, forming social architectures that grow collective intelligence, sharing and evaluating data planetarily, all while maintaining personal privacy and personal data ownership. A new decentralized economy is forming as we move from the third industrial revolution, digitization, to the fourth, decarbonization. By building a co-op, built on a correct by construction, concurrent, scalable solution, RChain is structured to build out the new technology that will be required for a flourishing regenerative planet. Please join us on this journey. Today, we discuss the implications of the fourth industrial revolution, decarbonization, and how this will intersect with the blockchain in a number of ways. Steve talked about several different projects he's involved with in Florida that are using blockchain technology to help solve climate change and local traffic congestion.
This week I've been checking out this guy, Thomas Stocker, and his talk about the fourth industrial revolution. And Thomas Stocker is the professor and head of the Department of Climate and Environmental Physics at the University of Bern. And he basically talks about breaking down the four industrial revolutions, how you kind of have to have some historical context to understand where we're going. So he claims the first industrial revolution was mechanization. The second was electrification. The third industrial revolution, which we are currently coming out of, was or is digitization. And the fourth industrial revolution is decarbonization. So basically, he's talking about the whole idea that as we move out of the digitization era and move into the decarbonization era, we're going to go through radical changes. Each one of these revolutions had an exponential impact on all aspects of society, and each one was exponentially greater than the other. And so if we imagine that idea, it's pretty awe-inspiring to think about the speed, the velocity, and the massive amounts of change that are going to be coming in front of us in the very near future. So yeah, I thought I'd just open with that concept, see what anyone has to say.
And I think also it's so interesting, the decarbonizing economy is, possibly worth trillions of dollars. And there are already so many blockchain projects that are focusing on the decarbonization economy. One of them, Nori, which is a project that Dale and I had a call with a couple weeks ago. And there are others. I just think it's really amazing that there are already people who are working on this. And there are going to be more who are building projects off of the blockchain, and they're going to need to integrate with blockchain in the future. So I just think it's really fascinating, the direction that we're headed in, because it's not just going to be enough to plant trees and to, build an electrical grid that is carbon neutral and everything. We're going to actually have to start taking carbon out of the atmosphere. So anyway, thank you, Daryl, for bringing this topic to my attention. I thought this was really fascinating. So does anybody have any comments about this or has noticed anything going on in their purview about this?
I was going to say, if you're talking about, electrical grids, Steve, you're on the call, right? I mean, isn't your startup involving the grid?
Well, not so much the electrical grid, but it's more transportation and transit. So I'm focused on trying to get cars off the road and get people to start taking transit. And in the form of transit, it's a 21st century technology called aerial personal rapid transit. But taking cars off the road, that's going to be help with the climate change issue by less cars, polluting our environment. And in addition, there's going to be less traffic and congestion. So those have been my efforts over the past couple years. In addition, there is the component of solar energy. So these sky pods, which will travel along a fixed guideway, the hope is that with the engineering that will be done, and engineering is being done by a company called Skytrain, that it'll be solar powered or mostly solar powered. We'll have a connection to the electrical grid, but the hope is that it'll be off grid and have enough energy to power the system. And in a sense, it could, if the system expands into a network, then we would have a solar grid, being able to supply energy to businesses or entities around the grid, depending on what the laws and regulations are.
Right on.
That's amazing, Steve.
That is
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
And-
Go ahead.
Oh, well, Christian wanted to bring up that we should talk more about the blockchain integrating with climate solutions. So I was wondering if your project, if you could talk about how you feel like the blockchain is going to create more transparency and possibly better coordination for these solutions as we move forward as a planet.
Right. So, the question is, okay, so with transportation and transit, what is the blockchain component? How does that come in? So, Skytrain is the California company that's doing the engineering for this 21st century technology, aerial transit. And we're Beach Tram, which is our pilot project to create a pilot project to connect downtown Clearwater to Clearwater Beach. We're representing the technology here in the Tampa Bay area. Now, imagine the system up and running. People, they get into a sky pod and they want to go over to Clearwater Beach. How are they going to, what's the payment mechanism? So, and this is where we created a new company called Transbit with the purpose of creating a digital transit token. And this is what brought me to the world of blockchain over a year ago, to start exploring what the possibilities are. And that's where I found RChain, or perhaps RChain found me. Because of the speed, scalability, and security, there was this alignment as far as a payment system for this new form of transit, with the idea that if this form of transit is successful and takes off, everyone will want it. Traffic congestion is a problem in all major cities. So there's the potential for a great expandability. And a payment system has to have that same scalability, expandability as the transit system. So with scalability and expandability, that means higher transactions, volumes of transactions. So that's the payment aspect of what we're trying to do. And then there's also whenever you have so for instance, say you have the Tampa Bay area and a network of aerial transit systems that go through different towns and so forth. For instance, in Pinellas County, which is the home of St. Petersburg and Clearwater, there's approximately 24 different municipalities, entities. So what we'll need to do is have agreements with each of these 24 entities to lease right-of-way. So when a segment of the aerial transit system goes through, for instance, the town of Dunedin, Florida, which is just north of Clearwater, Dunedin, who is leasing their right-of-way, and perhaps a plot of land for a station, they'll want to be reimbursed for the use of that right of way and for the station. So for instance, I'm in downtown St. Petersburg and I want to go to Dunedin, Florida. So when I purchase that ticket, that access, that payment is going to get divided up in sort of a revenue sharing across the various municipalities, and also to Dunedin for revenue sharing for allocation. So there needs to be a smart system, perhaps a blockchain system that's going, a smart contract that's going to automate these processes. And so it's over a regional area, you're going to have multiple entities involved that aren't necessarily trusting of one another, or not trusting of of the aerial transit. They'll want to have a software-based trustless environment. So that's the advantage of a blockchain solution. And then with the future, there could be elements of artificial intelligence, where you have particular sky pods that are geared towards staying local and generate revenue in a local assignment, or they've have artificial intelligence to venture out, and go to Orlando or across the state, and that's where the future is kind of interesting, as far as what blockchain and as it goes into these other disciplines of deep learning and artificial intelligence, and automation of what could potentially happen. So those are exciting things on the horizon.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you have a link to that project?
Yes, we have updated our website, so you can visit here. Let me post the link in the chat.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and let me go to the website on my computer here, and I'm just going to copy and paste it.
What a great project to be part of.
Yeah, it's everyone has their own motivations as far as what drives them. And if you're doing something that's for the social good, sure, there's the you need a monetary incentive, because everyone has to survive and pay bills and feed themselves. But if you're fortunate enough to have something that's going to have an altruistic and social good, that just helps put wind in your sails, and it just drives,
so to speak.
Yes.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that people need to eat, or that people need to live, however you said it, because it's been proven so often lately, especially in the past year or so, that these low carbon energy solutions are more profitable than the dirtier ones, and that this is the way forward financially, and they're really starting to discover the fiscal impact of all of these climate disasters. Like, if we don't really get our asses into gear, just the trillions and trillions of dollars of damage that we're all going to go through over and over again, right? Because the climate disasters keep coming over and over again. And the UN just put out a report saying that we're experiencing more than one massive climate disaster every week around the world. And it's actually way more than one a week on average. That was a really conservative estimate, because obviously they didn't want to be called alarmist. But in some cases, we're having one every day. And so if you think about just the amount of money that we're wasting having to rebuild these places, and then of course sometimes it's not worth rebuilding them because we know that another disaster is going to come the next year. It's just insane how much money it costs when we could just do these other amazing solutions and decarbonize, and then hopefully a lot of these will be avoidable. Of course, we're never
we
going
can
to
kind of connect some of the things that we've said throughout this conversation today. I counted no less than 3 major applications of blockchain in Steve's account of his project.
Yes, totally. Right.
We just got the briefest account, right? There's probably a lot more going on. As an example, so when we talk about decarbonization, one of the things that really will matter in this is being able to keep a public record of exactly how much carbon was saved or removed, or how much carbon was emitted, right? Because we can't trust private institutions with this data at this point. I think we've seen this over and over again, but the blockchain provides this public record keeping capability. And that's also something that's necessary when you're talking about publicly funded projects like transport. And the thing that is also really exciting and interesting to me, and directly relates to this idea of coordination, is that Steve's project seems very specific in many ways, or if not specific, situated or to the realities on the ground in Tampa and the surrounding area. Perhaps you could replicate that project in other regions, and I imagine they have their eye on that. But at least with respect to Steve's presentation, it was, he was talking about geographical specifics and jurisdictional specifics, and this is where I think we really have to use blockchain to empower local communities to find solutions that serve them best. So just in this one conversation that we've had, and it was very brief, right? We've identified 4 major applications of blockchain, and all of them, as near as I can tell, demand scale and security, right? That it's not going to be okay. The existing blockchain deployments just will not serve the kinds of applications that are contemplated here in this specific application. So that's to me, it speaks directly to the RChain vision and scope, and mission, what we're trying to do. So I feel like this is a model for the kind of conversation I would love to have going forward.
Yay.
Yes, these websites are awesome, Steve.
No, thank you. Yeah, I'm putting a few up there. It's in with a regional solutions. There's actually other entities that we've formed in order to accomplish this. So the last one I put in was STAT, which is St. Pete Tampa Aerial Transit. And if you go to that link, you'll see Tropicana Field, the home of our famous Tampa Bay Rays. And just outside is a station that, and what's neat about the stadium is it's right along the CSX railway tracks. So they traverse Pinellas County and go right up to the stadium. So there's an existing right of way. So it's interesting. So here's an application of everything I've been talking about, of aerial transit, of a blockchain-based payment system, where on an average night during the baseball season, the stadium is mostly empty. We have one of the worst attendances in Major League Baseball. It's just empty seats. But the Monday night, this past Monday and Tuesday, the American League conference games were here in St. Petersburg, and the entire stadium was filled. It was like 34,000 to 50,000 people, and it takes a major event for people to attend to fill the stadium. And the reason why they don't want to come to the stadium is because it's a hassle. You see the parking lot there, so and you have to drive to the stadium. You have to deal with all the traffic and all the congestion. It's not an easy thing to do. So in the future, envision a world where there's aerial transit. And now, if you want to go to a baseball game, you're going to go to your app, and you're going to buy, when you buy your ticket to the game, it's going to include your transportation as well. So it's going to be all inclusive. So you just want to go to the game, and you want to get there the less stressful way as possible. So we'll have in the future, hundreds and thousands of SkyPods floating around on the aerial transit network, and there's going to be the smart intelligence to know the forecasting model of where they need to be on any particular time and day. So you know that on a Monday night at 7 o'clock, 2 hours before, the SkyPods need to be started aggregating towards downtown St. Petersburg, or actually, maybe back up, they need to go to certain sections of the town for people to get onto stations to go to the game. And then once the game ends at 10 o'clock, they need to be there at the station to have everyone filter out of the stadium expeditiously and get back home. So, there's forecasting models that need to be done. So, yeah, there's a lot of new technologies and ideas and things that has to happen in order for us to get to this point. And when you speak of coordination, it's coordination. I mean, it's you have people who want to get around town and go to events and go to different venues, and the forecasting that's involved, and the infrastructure, and that has to be available, and potential, all the SkyPods and so forth. All of that coordination has to happen, and what's going to be the tools to do that? The tools don't exist just yet, and that in a sense is kind of what we're working on. Is we're at the tip of the spear, so to speak, creating this toolbox that. And once it's created, this is we create a model or a template which could be replicated, across the bay for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, or for the University of South Florida Bulls. They're going to be building a new stadium, and in the future, aerial transit. Here's a station that's outside, but stadiums of the future. The tracks will go into the stadium and loop around. So you'll get off the SkyPod at the section of where you're going to be seating, and to create even more convenience. So yeah, lots of possibilities.
That's really cool. In Vancouver, they've had this thing called the Skytrain, which is maybe a little bit similar. It's just basically like it's on a track. It's kind of less futuristic looking, but it's on rails.
Yes, I've watched videos of the Skytrain. When I Google Skytrain in the search results, I get some results for the Vancouver Skytrain. So yeah, I've gone to the site a few times actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, to me, what you're talking about is just Skytrain is third industrial revolution. You're talking fourth industrial revolution there.
Yeah. So it's
very cool.
The decarbonization of industry. So yeah, so it's and I with this call, and we think about what are these applications, these future applications for blockchain technology. Some applications will be apparent, in the world of finance, and with the with tokens and the storage of value, that has proven to be a successful use case. Some other use cases are not always quite apparent, and what we're doing here locally at Blockspaces, they've come up with a qualification matrix for you. The idea is you take an industry, and there's a criteria a criterion that you go through of 100 questions or so forth, and you mark or scale these based on the power of what blockchain can and cannot do. So you're going through scoring a particular industry or use case, and you come up with the end result tally. And in the Blockspaces model, you have to reach a 60 or above in order for it to be a reasonably good case, use case for a blockchain. So I haven't looked under the hood of what their matrix is, and it's going to be proprietary. It is going to be under certain conditions that I'm just a member to Blockspaces, so I have a limited set of what I can and cannot do there. But it speaks to the idea of something. Perhaps this is something we might want to consider. As we're a platform that is going to be cross industry, but when we look at cross industry, well, what are these various use cases, and what are going to be good use cases, medium, and maybe not so good? And if we could come up with and we certainly have the intellectual capacity here to come up with our own grid or matrix of qualifying and scoring the various industries as far as if they would be a good use case or not. And so we create the R-chain scoring, a blockchain scoring mechanism, and we use this as an internal template. And this becomes sort of a standard that we use that is across all the members. So the co-op members will get educated to get an understanding of what a good use case of blockchain would be, and what a not so good use of blockchain would be. So then they'll have sort of at their fingertips, sort of a rough scaling mechanism to kind of run in their own mind to kind of get oriented. So they feel they're included in this process. So I think you get more people sort of on the same page. But we use this scaling or grid mechanism as we do our business development and we speak to potential strategic partners. And some of them they're new to the world space of blockchain, and they're wanting to get educated. But we have a tool set that we can present, and we could go through and do a sort of a pre-charting before we have a conversation with them, and then then we sit down. It's like based on your industry and what the components that we understand, this is where you line up. And they go and they would say, and then that would start a discussion. It's like, oh well, and there's some others, and we can some on your graph are not right, then you shift it up or down dependent. So that's something that I've been sort of thinking about as a tool in our toolbox to help us to efficiently go through and check the various industries which have a strong blockchain use case and others that do not. And so if we identify the industries where there's a strong alignment with blockchain, well, then that might be, if we think about business development, industries that we would want to target first, as far as as we sort of an outreach and connecting with those industries and the players within those industries, and then kind of work down the chain. Certain industries will be more open, more receptive than others, and you just kind of move on, going through your list that you've kind of pre-scored with the template. So those are some ideas that I've been having.
Yeah. Do you have a link to that sheet?
Well, I can provide a link to the blockspaces.io, but this is something that they've just created, and they're guarding it. I mean, this is their
I see. Yeah,
proprietary. So they're using this as a form of revenue generation.
I
So
see. So we have to make our own.
Yeah, they've created a brand name for themselves here in Florida. They've been all over the place. So people go to Blockspaces and say, "Hey, we've been hearing about this blockchain thing, and we want to know more about it, and we want to know how it would apply to our specific use case, our industry. Can you sit down and talk to us for a while?" So they came up with this grid to where they do go through the scoring mechanism to say is it going to be a strong use case, not so, or somewhere in the middle. So in that sort of consultation, the client would get more oriented. So yes, we would create something of our own, but I think those of us, and I'm still relatively fresh to this whole industry, only kind of been in the space for a year and a half or so. But I think, with others here on the call and more broadly in the co-op community, we can certainly start the discussion as far as what this template would be, this scoring mechanism, and what we come up with would be comparable to Blockspaces or any other entity, and we could even gear it more, tailor it towards our chain, with the caveat and the understanding that our strengths as a blockchain platform are speed, scalability, and security. So you can have that kind of as a backdrop to the template that we create. So
yeah, that's such a good idea.
Yeah, and this might be, as far as we create sort of a task force or a team who's working on this the scoring mechanism, this template, and we kind of check in, if this is something that we feel is needed in our efforts, creating a group to develop this, and then we check in each week. This might be a venue to kind of get the updates, and it moves forward, and then slowly it takes shape. And what's the user interface? Is it going to be on a spreadsheet or a website? How do we want to, is it going to be on paper? Is it going to be digital? Working out those user interface mechanics. And then, so that's one aspect, but then, what's under the hood, the core to all this. So, there's certainly a lot of components and aspect that needs to be thought through and worked out. But I mean, we certainly, narrowly and more broadly speaking, we have all the minds that we need to create this, at least starting discussion and kind of thinking it through.
And we've only got 1 minute before the staff meeting, but I just wanted to say that I heartily support and endorse this approach, because it's also it's a lead generation mechanism for a solutions group, right? In any solutions group within the cooperative that wants to go and help dApp developers get started, well, they don't necessarily know which dApp developers to focus on, or to go contact and be proactive about developing that market. And what you're talking about would end up with generating leads for a solutions group. So there are multiple uses for what you're talking about, which I think is just really phenomenal.